This is CBC Winnipeg News.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. He was once a Manitoba success story, the pride of Deloraine. Today, opening arguments began in Toronto at the sexual assault trial of Peter Nygard. It's the first in a series of trials to be faced by the disgraced fashion mogul in 3 provinces, including Manitoba and in the United States. Nygard has pleaded not guilty to sexually assaulting 5 women between the late 1980s and 2005. Cameron McIntosh has the latest.
Morning, Mr. Greenspan.
Peter Nygard's lawyers said nothing going into Toronto's Ontario Superior Court of Justice. Inside, Nygard appeared in a black suit, his signature long white hair pulled back, sitting with his defense team showing no emotion as charges were read against him. Crown attorney Anna Serbin alleging Nygard used his power and influence to sexually assault 5 different women, ranging in age from 16 to 28, here at his Toronto headquarters between 1988 and 2005. In a bedroom that had no door handles, Nygard, she alleged, controlled the locks.
The jury and anyone watching this is going to be hearing, I believe, some very grave accounts of a high degree of violence.
Therapist Shannon Moroney has treated some of the 5 women Nygard is accused of assaulting. Crown lawyers plan to call all 5 to testify. Their identities under publication ban.
Behind the publication bans, there are real human beings here. They are daughters, sisters, mothers.
None of the allegations are proven. Nygard, 82, has pleaded not guilty to 5 counts of sexual assault and 1 count of forcible confinement. The trial is expected to take 7 weeks. Finland-born, Nygard built up his international women's fashion empire from humble beginnings in Winnipeg. At its peak, there were hundreds of stores across North America, as the fashion mogul cultivated an image of a jet-setting playboy. Nygard International filed for bankruptcy in 2020 as allegations started to come forward.
The Toronto trial is really just a beginning for Nygard. He also faces other charges in Quebec and in Winnipeg. After those trials, the Canadian government has agreed to extradite him to face other charges in New York. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The police watchdog is looking into an arrest in Brandon that saw a man hit by a police car. Watch this video shot by a witness. This happened on Sunday in front of police headquarters. The independent investigation unit says Brandon police were trying to arrest a man for arson. Here it is again. When he was hit by the police cruiser, he suffered a broken arm. The IIU is asking anyone who saw what happened or has video of the incident to give them a call. More money to fight property crime is the latest election promise from the Progressive Conservatives. Fort White candidate Abi Khan says the Tories would spend $1 million each year to expand the Winnipeg Police Property Crime Unit. He says that would pay for 50 to 60 extra shifts for police officers. Khan says they could then focus on community-based crime prevention measures.
Whether it's their garage, property from the front yard, their car getting broken into, these are real concerns and real safety issues that need to be dealt with. So this $1 million will go to directly affect that and make our streets safer.
Khan says the extra shifts would also allow officers to respond more quickly to reports of break-ins and thefts. The PC's also pledged, if re-elected, to spend $5 million supporting first responders suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. Waverley candidate John Reyes says the new funding would cover programs focused on prevention, early intervention, and treatment.
The big thing is protecting them from a mental health services standpoint and also retention. That's one of the things that we want to ensure that we take care of them so that they continue doing their job in a professional and being very healthy in terms of their mental health, because it's such a high stressful job.
Reyes says the money would pay for counseling, mental health awareness campaigns, and educational programs to destigmatize seeking help. In addition, the provincial Tories promised a new road linking St. Teresa Point and Wasagamak and a new airport for the Island Lake region. As for the New Democrats, they promised to boost French services in Manitoba if elected. Leader Wab Kinew says he'd work with La Société de la Francophonie Manitobaine and La Division Scolaire Franco-Manitobaine to make improvements. He says he would restore the Assistant Deputy Minister position in Le Bureau de l'Éducation Française and work with l'Université de Saint-Boniface to train and recruit more French teachers.
This announcement here today, along with our great candidate and some of his team and members of the community, is a moment for us to reflect on the important role that the Francophone community and the Métis people have played in creating the Manitoba that we know and love.
Kinew says cuts made by the PC government caused a crisis in French language services, especially in healthcare. He pledges to ensure that Info Santé's phone line is restored. Indigenous leaders say they want to hear more from Manitoba's political parties. First Nations in Manitoba make up a larger proportion of the population than in any other province. Still, Grand Chief Cathy Merrick of the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs says she hasn't heard much from the political parties so far.
I know that some candidates have talked a little bit, have touched on a little bit of the issues that affect First Nations in Manitoba, but it has to be more because we are 165,000 strong here in Manitoba.
Merrick says improving access to health care in First Nation communities is a top priority. She says communities often have nursing stations, but many people have to travel to cities for care. Reforming the child welfare system is another priority for Merrick, as well as improving economic development opportunities for First Nations. A new poll says Manitobans are divided on the proposed search of the Prairie Green landfill. People were asked if they support or oppose searching the landfill for the remains of 2 Indigenous women. As CBC's Brittany Greenslade reports, it's become a central and divisive issue during this election campaign.
With just 1 week till voters get ready to cast their ballot, one issue has stirred up a deep divide. Whether or not Prairie Green landfill should be searched for the remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron.
In this particular case, the answer had to be no.
We definitely need to try.
We were the first party to commit to searching the Prairie Green landfill.
A new poll shows how this election issue has polarized the province. 47% of people polled by Probe Research support a search. 45% are opposed, and women are more likely than men to be in favor.
And it's a bit unsettling because I think there's such a emotional human element here, and I am, frustrated that it's this way.
Progressive Conservative leader Heather Stephenson doubled down on her stance with a full-page advertisement saying they stand firm on the decision, a move political scientist Réal Carrier says won't bode well.
I think this should be treated as a human issue, and I'm not sure why this has become the central platform of the PC party here and this election. I don't think it's a good strategy.
Political scientist Kelly Saunders says it could backfire.
I think it's a dangerous game that the Conservatives are playing because, it carries high risk with it, right? I mean, a lot of soft Conservatives, a lot of women voters, might be uncomfortable with this. It's like, oh, why are you politicizing and weaponizing an issue that is a traumatic, horrific event?
2 recent polls have the NDP and leader Wab Kinew leading with strong support. Saunders says turning the search into a key election issue shows the PCs are worried.
If you look at the latest polls, seem to suggest that the house is on fire. We got to scramble to save the furniture and do whatever we can to try to salvage, whatever seats we can.
Whether or not it works, both say it shouldn't have become a political issue to begin with. Brittany Greenslade, CBC News, Winnipeg.
In an election debate where Manitoba's party leaders emphasized their differences, it was their similarities that stood out. The CBC's Ian Fraze reports now from Brandon.
Mr. Lamont, you're going to be on the far right.
That's not like me.
On a debate stage in Brandon Tuesday morning, they stood apart. chuckling over their positions.
Ms. Stephenson, yes, you're on the far left.
There you go.
I don't think there's any hidden messages in the order there.
But on a project critical to Brandon's future, the leaders are standing together, promising money for a new facility at Assiniboine Community College.
I would like to commit to the Prairie Innovation Center.
We will be participating in that, absolutely, yes.
We have no question or no hesitation in saying we'll support it.
This new facility for agriculture education would be located behind me in this century-old building, empty for decades, that was once a mental health hospital. The college says enrollment would increase from around 300 agriculture and food processing students to 800.
1 in 3 jobs in agriculture is expected to go unfilled by 2029, and so this helps to advance against that.
The new Prairie Innovation Center will bring agriculture and related classes under one roof. It'll cost almost $120 million. If elected, the NDP would put up half the cost, while the PCs and Liberals are committing to help financially too. While in government, the Tories put $10 million toward initial planning and promised 216 on-site childcare spaces. The party leaders did not agree on everything. PC leader Heather Stephenson defended her record.
New 16-bed ICU units and an expanded neonatal ICU unit.
I'm sorry, we're well over the 90 seconds.
Okay, sorry, I got to look
Forgive
over here.
me.
There's so many good news stories here.
At the start of this election campaign, the emergency department in Carberry closed.
New campus for the University of Manitoba Medical School here in Brandon. It just makes sense, instead of just putting all of our eggs in one basket and concentrating all of our development in Winnipeg.
One race to watch on election night is Brandon East. The NDP is trying to win a seat the PCs have held since 2016. Ian Fraze, CBC News, Brandon.
After days meeting with the conciliator, Manitoba Public Insurance says it has improved its offer to striking workers. Chairman Ward Keith says MPI followed the advice of the conciliator and met the union's demands to offer the same wage increase to all workers. Keith hopes the union will put this offer to a vote and end the 5-week-old strike.
It represents the best deal MPI can put on the table, an offer that is as responsive to union leadership as it can be, while balancing the corporation's obligations to both its employees and to Manitoba ratepayers more broadly.
Now, as for the Manitoba Government and General Employees Union, it says the offer falls short of cost of living increases. Leadership says it will not allow its members to vote on the offer. The City of Winnipeg has made progress on replenishing its tree canopy. Mayor Scott Gillingham says in recent years the number of trees planted rose from around 3,500 a year to 15,000 a year. The city announced the latest round of its homegrown grant program at the Transcona Cemetery today. The program gives up to $20,000 to nonprofit organizations to plant trees in their communities. Carrie LaFrance is Supervisor of Forestry Technical Services.
It is important to be mindful of the challenges that are yet ahead of us. Climate change being one example, some of the storms like we had a few weeks ago. It's important to build resiliency into our canopy, and it's not just about the number of trees, but planting a diversity of species.
The city has set a goal of planting 70,000 trees by 2027. Meteorologist John Sonder joins us now. A lot of people would still be growing things and almost planting things now because it's been such a mild September.
Yeah, mild September and a long growing season. I have some numbers for you to share with you. Yes, a mild September, top 10 warmest Septembers for sure. We got that one, possibly the top 5 warmest. And let's talk about the growing season. It's already one of the longest, well, it will be the longest since 1977 and will likely go down as the 3rd longest growing season on record. And we've been keeping records here in this part of the province for about 150 years. So significantly warm this month. We've dropped from 24 last hour now to 22 degrees, and our dew point still up in around that 12-13 range over the last few hours. Southeast winds right at 19 to 20 kilometers per hour through the day. Lots of sunshine. Hope you had a chance to get outside and play. Recess for the kids today must have been wonderful being outside. There is a little bit more cloud west of the Red River Valley in southwestern Manitoba. Up to the north, though, still relatively clear, and we'll have a clear sky here overnight and not much cloud across the north. And then as we get into Wednesday, we start to see a little system setting up in Saskatchewan that could bring some showers into the afternoon in areas like Lynn Lake and through Brochet, but nothing but sunshine here across the south. There will be a little bit more in the way of wind. I'll touch on that in just a second. The next system I'm looking at is moving quickly from the southwest through Saskatchewan Thursday morning, and by the time the afternoon hits, we're looking at some showers and possibly even some storm activity up through the Interlake, Lake Winnipeg area, and then farther north, Barons River and up toward God's Lake and Island Lake. Now, Winnipeg is just on the southern edge of this in the afternoon on Thursdays, so we may be far enough north here to catch a few of those showers in the afternoon and evening, but it does look like clearing happens on Thursday night into Friday. I do think that more cloud will roll in on Friday, and we have, again, a chance of showers. Showed you this yesterday. There is a hint of some cooler weather and an upper-level trough setting up toward the weekend and on Sunday as we look at Saskatchewan and northern Manitoba, but we will still be in the mild air here in the southern prairies, even on Sunday afternoon, although there is some rain in my forecast. 11 degrees under clear skies tonight, tomorrow morning, 12, a similar morning to what you saw this morning, and then the winds do pick up southeast around 30 to 40, a high of 21, so a breezier day, and we'll shave a few degrees off the daytime high. We stay in the low 20s. There's the Thursday night rain, few showers on Friday. Saturday, mostly a sun-cloud mix, but some rain late in the day, Janet, that could continue on Sunday, and I'll have more on that in the 7-day forecast.
Thanks very much, John.
You bet.
Coming up next, our sit-down interview with the leader of the New Democratic Party of Manitoba. More on Wab Kinew next. You're watching CBC. 1 week from tonight is election night in Manitoba. In order to get to know them all better, we're bringing you a series of one-on-one interviews with the leaders of each of Manitoba's political parties. CBC's Marcy Marcusa sat down with NDP leader Wab Kinew.
Well, Wab Kinew was first elected as MLA in Fort Rouge in 2016. In less than a year, he became the leader of Manitoba's NDP. He is a former journalist, rap artist, an author, and an honorary witness of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Let's welcome Wab Kinew for our conversation and interview. He is the leader of the New Democratic Party of Manitoba. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me, Marcy.
Thanks for being here at CBC with us.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
So let's start with this province and the state we're in.
Yeah.
What do you see as the biggest division in Manitoba right now?
I think that coming out of the pandemic, we were so stressed out and it had such a toll on all of us that it really is time to bring people together again in Manitoba. And we've sort of staked our campaign on that belief. You know, our campaign slogan is "Make Life Better Together." The idea that we do have these big challenges like healthcare, the cost of living, not to mention, you know, the fact everyone's on their own kind of social media avenue, that it really is time to bring people together. And so I think that these big projects before us are a unique opportunity for us to say, yeah, we want to fix healthcare, so let's build a consensus to do that.
I'm going to ask you about healthcare specifically in a moment, but when it comes to the point about on social media and the division that you alluded to there, what would you do specifically if elected to address that? Where the divides can be deep, to bring back people into the fold. How are you equipped to lead those conversations in this province?
Well, one of the things that I've tried to communicate to Manitobans in this campaign is that we don't have to agree on everything. We don't have to agree on everything in order to do the big things together. And so there may be a difference of opinion on some issues of the day, but I think we all know that we want to make the cost of living more affordable in Manitoba. So let's focus on those economic issues together. We all know that healthcare needs to get improved, so let's focus on working on healthcare together. And then hopefully, if we recognize that there's that consensus on the big things, then maybe we can have a difference of opinion on some other issues, but still know that we're fellow Manitobans, fellow Canadians invested in one another's futures.
Healthcare. You've promised to reopen emergency departments at 3 Winnipeg hospitals. An ER physician, however, told CBC that that would likely require hiring hundreds of workers in the middle of a staffing crunch and restoring support services that were cut from the hospitals. So my question is, how realistic is your plan?
Very realistic, and actually what that emergency room doctor is articulating is our plan. We said at the outset that staffing has to come first. Like, our first healthcare commitment was on staffing, and specifically to hire 300 nurses in the city of Winnipeg and another 300 in rural Manitoba. So if we do that over the first 2 years of a mandate, should we get the honor of serving, then we'll be in a position to move ahead with the emergency rooms. So I hope.
How are you going to do that, though? Because it's not like the PCs haven't been trying to recruit nurses, and the gap is big. So 300 nurses, I just want people to understand the real numbers. We've been told there are more than 2,000 vacancies.
That's right.
So you're 1,700 short just in the vacancies to begin with. Never mind all the other staff that it would take to run an ER.
Yeah.
Specialists, they would need it. So it's a big promise. It feels short on details.
Well, the 300 nurses is the 2-year target, and then we keep hiring after that to get to that other 1,700 that you're talking about. But in the question of how do we do it, one, we got to be competitive with pay. We have to improve working conditions. But one thing that our team is really focused on that I don't think the current government can deliver on is to improve the culture within healthcare. Part of the reason why we're losing so many nurses and other healthcare professionals is because the culture within healthcare is focused too much on some of the upper management targets, but not listening to the front lines. And we need to reverse that culture if we want to keep people working on the front lines and add more. So it's really about investing not just resources, but also decision-making power in those people who are at the bedside. And that's where our plan starts.
Now, you just said in terms of attracting nurses, you said pay.
Yeah.
Does that mean should NDP form government, you're going to increase pay for nurses and change that in Manitoba to attract more people?
Yeah, and we'll include some people who are left out of the current incentive programs, like nurse practitioners, for instance, because NPs, nurse practitioners, are a very, very important part of meeting our needs around Manitobans who don't have a family doctor, who don't have access to primary care. And that's both in Winnipeg and in rural Manitoba. So again, our first healthcare commitment was a $500 million human resource plan over a term in government, and that is the first priority. Nothing else that we want to have happen in healthcare will take place unless we have the staff to do so.
So you start with 300 in the city, and then you said 300 rurally,
yes,
and then you continue on the trajectory to get to the 1,700.
Exactly.
How long will it take to fill all of the positions, and then plus what you're going to need to staff ERs?
It could take 7 or 8 years, if we're being realistic. But our plan is judicious, it's common sense, and it's something that we're committed to implementing over a series of time. Because again, it took the PC 7 years to bring our healthcare system to this position. And I think realistically, we should expect that it's going to take 7 or 8 years for us to get back to the place where we need to build Manitoba's healthcare system for the future.
You've made many pledges around restoring all kinds of different services in the province. So at the end of the day, what's the price tag for all of the promises?
In the healthcare system?
In your whole plan.
It's less than $500 million a year.
For all of the promises
Correct.
you made?
Yep.
So the PCs have costed your promises at more than $3.2 billion. You're saying that it's that far off?
The PCs are desperate, and you are going to see them continue to get more desperate in the coming week.
So what's the costed, how does that big number you just gave me, how does that break down into healthcare then?
The healthcare number is $125 million annually for staff incentives, and then a series of additional investments into some of the buildings like the cancer care headquarters and the new emergency rooms. But the thing that you have to remember about standing up a building is that it's paid off over a series of years, just like your mortgage on the house. But for a government, when they stand up a piece of vertical infrastructure, it's a 40-year term. It's amortized over 40 years. So again, when we're looking at the specific 1 year amount for the investments that we're talking about, it's less than $500 million, and we have the money in the budget right now to be able to do those things.
Some Manitobans might not like debt financing over 40 years. They might think fiscal responsibility matters in the current moment and in this climate. What would you say to them?
Oh, this is just the rule. This is just the way that the government has to pay for buildings when they build them.
Let's move from affordability for people at the individual level. So aside from cutting the gas tax and freezing hydro rates for a year, what other tax cuts would you consider to helping Manitobans who are struggling?
Well, I think housing is such a big issue right now, right? The Manitoban who is starting their life and is trying to save up for a down payment, the seniors who are living on a fixed income. And so that's why we've proposed a $700 renter's tax credit that'll help people on fixed incomes, that'll help the young couple save to be able to make a down payment. And then when we're talking about the housing stock, to your question in particular, we're saying we're going to take the PST off of new rental unit construction in Manitoba. Right now there's a lot of capital that's sitting on the sidelines because of interest rates being so high. And so this is one financial incentive a government can take to ensure that there's more rental units being built. That's going to help everyone be able to access housing more quickly. It's also going to help on the affordability side with more supply.
And you feel there's enough money for you to be able to make all of these promises and achieve all of these things you're talking about?
100%.
Already there?
Yep, that's right. Under the PCs, they have put more than $500 million, $520 million annually in unallocated funds. And right now what happens is March Madness rolls around the end of the fiscal year, and they use that for mailing checks to everybody or whatever their idea of the moment is. And what we're saying, our fundamental fiscal idea, and what we think is more transparent, more fiscally responsible, is instead of just waiting for March Madness to spend that $500 million that's already in the budget, we're going to tell you right now that we're going to spend that on healthcare and making life more affordable.
I want to turn to parental rights. Do you think that parents should be informed by schools if a child expresses a different gender than what they were assigned at birth?
Well, I think that the first thing I want to say is that I'm never going to come between you and your child. And I think parents have a right to know, but children also have a right to be able to express who they are, what their identity is. And so I have a lot of trust in teachers, a lot of trust in young people, and a lot of trust in parents. And what I think the role of a real leader is to do right now is to bring people together, to articulate what that's going to look like in Manitoba.
So parents have a right.
The divisive nature of what the PCs are trying to do on this issue, I think, is the exact opposite of what we need in our province today.
But if you lead all of the families in Manitoba, and parents have a right to know, and yet if a child doesn't have a safe home environment where that parent, maybe could or should be informed, do you follow the lead then of the teachers, or how do you govern? What do you do with that?
This is why we need to bring people together to sort through these difficult issues. But for the PCs to try and inflame sentiment on this issue because they're desperate in an election campaign, I think is the wrong approach. It's very divisive, and frankly, we don't need to be divided in Manitoba anymore. We need to bring people together.
If you win, as you well know, you would become the only First Nations person to ever hold the title of Premier of Manitoba. What would that mean to you personally?
I want to be the best Premier that I can be for the people of Manitoba, because that's what you deserve. So again, I know that I would have a responsibility to First Nations youth, Indigenous youth, but again, all youth in Manitoba, to do things in a positive way and build our province up for the future. But my campaign and my career in politics is not about being the First Nations Premier of Manitoba. It's about being the best Premier that Manitoba can get, because it is about building this province for the future on issues like healthcare.
Make that history. I'm looking for the personal answer. You got to look at yourself in the mirror. If you do make that history, what will it mean to you?
We're still one vote behind, and I still have more than a week to go out and earn the support of people of Manitoba, and that's the job that I'm focused on right now.
We'll leave it there. Good luck on October 3rd, Wab Kinew. Thank you.
Thanks, Marcy.
House of Commons Speaker Anthony Rota has resigned following pressure from all political parties. The story next. You're watching CBC Winnipeg News. The Speaker of the House of Commons, Anthony Rota, has announced his resignation from that post.
I reiterate my profound regret for my error in recognizing an individual in the House during the joint address to Parliament of President Zelensky. That public recognition has caused pain to individuals and communities, including the Jewish community in Canada and around the world, in addition to survivors of Nazi atrocities in Poland, among other nations. I accept full responsibility for my actions. My resignation is effective at the end of the sitting day tomorrow, Wednesday, September 27th, to allow preparations for the election of a new Speaker. Until that time, the Deputy Speakers will chair the House proceedings. Thank you. Merci.
On Friday, during the visit by the Ukrainian president, this happened. Rota introduced that man you saw standing up, a Ukrainian Second World War veteran, a 98-year-old. MPs rose twice to give him a standing ovation, but it turns out he had fought with a Nazi unit. Rota apologized for introducing him. He's been Speaker since 2019. He remains in Parliament representing a riding in northeastern Ontario. Food Banks Canada has released its first ever poverty report card. Just over half the governments in Canada received a grade of D or lower. Manitoba received a C-.
Governments have been graded based on how they compare with each other on real lived experience of poverty, statistical measurements of poverty, a standard of living, and government progress on passing anti-poverty legislation.
The report looked at everything from the cost of housing to the availability of social safety supports. Key findings of the report include that more than 42% of people feel financially worse off than they did last year. Almost 1 in 5 reported experiencing food insecurity, and around a third of respondents say they were coping with an inadequate standard of living. This report comes at a time when food bank visits are at a record level, and it says more action is required by all levels of government in Canada. U.S. President Joe Biden took the unprecedented step today of walking a picket line. He joined striking auto workers outside a General Motors warehouse in suburban Detroit, something no other sitting United States president has done.
You guys, the UAW, you saved the automobile industry back in 2008 and before. Made a lot of sacrifices, gave up a lot, and the companies were in trouble. But now they're doing incredibly well. And guess what? You should be doing incredibly well, too.
Auto workers in the United States have been striking against the big Detroit car makers for nearly 2 weeks. Labor disruptions have spread to 20 states. The union is looking for significant improvements to wages, pensions, and hours of work. Time now to check in once again with meteorologist John Sauter.
Yeah, not just warm here in the south, but some records broken across northern Manitoba. A few of them, and it's important to know that records in a lot of these smaller communities have only been kept for 20 years, so it's pretty easy to break a record, but here's a few of them for you. Records on this date in Gillam. 24.3, the old record, 22.1, set back in 1997. George Island, 20.2 today, so just over the old record, and Kelsey Dam was 23.3, and that was a location that broke a record last week as well. Island Lake did break this old record in 1997 at 24.5 today, so some of the northern regions were even warmer than we were here in the south today. We got to 24 in Winnipeg, currently 22 at the airport, still 23 downtown. Similar numbers in the regions just outside the city, like Morris and Steinbach. Here in the southwest, it's 19 in Brandon and in Melita. A little bit more cloud cover in the southwest through the afternoon. And then back to the east, we're 20 in Sprague, 21 in Kenora, and 20 in Red Lake, 22 in Barons River. And then in the north, we still have temperatures in the 20s. Now, Churchill is 15 right now. Tomorrow, you're looking at a temperature that will be much, much warmer than that. Gillam still at 24. Island Lake now at 23. So the eastern side of the province is actually warmer than the west. How about that? Tonight across northwestern Ontario. A fairly clear sky between 9 and 11 degrees. And we'll see similar conditions here in southeastern Manitoba with a low once again of 11 in Winnipeg, 10 in Emerson and in Steinbach, and a low of 11 in Brandon, in Dauphin, Swan River, Morden, Winkler, Porterville Prairie down to 12. And across the north tonight, not a whole lot of cloud cover here. Winds will start to pick up tomorrow in Churchill out of the south and gusting to 60, but that'll help boost your temperature up to about 23. And we still have lots of sunshine in the east. Again, 23s and 24s. Low 20s for the rest of the regions, and then there's that little disturbance I showed you earlier on Futurecast that will run right up through the Lynn Lake area and provide about a 30 or 40% chance of an afternoon shower. That's a look at your southwest. Mix of sun and cloud in the southwest. Mainly sunny in Portage, Morden, and Winkler, and a high of 21. 21 here in Winnipeg and breezy, southeast around 30 to 40. But lots of sunshine here in the southeast and across into northwestern Ontario, with some sun in Red Lake, a sun-cloud mix in Kenora, and temperatures between 19 and 20 degrees.
Thanks very much, John.
You're welcome.
It's one of the first excavations in Canada to happen near a former residential school. How the Pine Creek First Nation in Western Manitoba is paving the way for other communities that want answers. That story next on CBC Winnipeg News. Now, this next story contains distressing details. It's about the Pine Creek First Nation in western Manitoba, one of the first in Canada to excavate a site near a former residential school. CBC's Wamish Hamilton explores how the community is paving the way for others as it faces tough revelations that come with searching for answers.
In western Manitoba, they're sifting through fragments of a difficult history. This archaeological team is poring over dirt from the bowels of an old church. It was next door to a residential school that existed here for almost 80 years.
So these are called shaker screens.
The Pine Creek First Nation hired forensic anthropologist Emily Holland and her crew from Brandon University to conduct this project.
One thing about doing this work in any kind of archaeological context is to be thorough and systematic, right? So by the time you're done, you can say you looked at everything that was in here.
They're among the first in Canada to dig at the site of a former residential school. What they find could have profound implications for other First Nations considering their own excavations. Tell me where it is we're going and what's down there.
Well, right now we're going to go into the basement of Our Lady of Seven Sorrows Church in Pine Creek First Nation. And they have identified 14 different GPR reflections in here, and we're in the process of excavating them. Please go ahead. Watch the first step.
We've been given special access to the basement turned excavation site. Survivors told stories of horrors here, of bodies buried. Over the past month, the team has dug 14 holes.
So there are 14 reflections identified in this basement. And when we were making the plans for doing this work, we had to plan as though we were going to find 14 graves with 14 people.
Last year, Pine Creek was one of many First Nations across Canada to conduct a ground-penetrating radar survey, or GPR. They hired a company with drones and other equipment to scan the ground near the church and under it. In the basement, they detected 14 what are called reflections, or anomalies. In the surrounding fields, there were dozens more.
There's 31 out here. It starts, there's a few here, and then they're up all in a row over there in the fields.
Brenda Catchaway is a third-generation survivor of the school. She's helped organize the searches. She remembers the anxiety and anger here after the initial findings.
There were some community members that wanted to just go ahead and go in the church basement and start digging themselves. And, you know, we told them, well, you can't do that. It's got to be done by experts. It's got to be like, what if we damage any findings that we come upon if it's human remains? And I sensed the urgency that we needed to find out for sure if those anomalies were human remains.
Taking that step of actually deciding to dig, of trying to confirm what those anomalies are, led down a tough road. Many in the community wanted to leave the past in the past. Then there were other First Nations that had to be consulted because their children also attended the school here.
We began with community engagements after the 215 announced in Kamloops. Our elders right away said, we have a history here that needs to be told, that needs to be shared. People need to know the truth.
Chief Derek Niepanak is the son of a survivor, a grandson and a great-grandson of a survivor. The limbs of his family tree are weighed down by hard memories of this school. This huge decision was left for him to steer.
But this has been very, very difficult for me as a boy from this community. You know, it's not been easy, and what makes it even more difficult is that because my heart is exposed to the process, I'm vulnerable. I'm vulnerable to the criticisms of those who did not want to go this way.
There were different perspectives about this issue during your consultations, and not everyone necessarily agreed with excavating. How did you deal with that? Must have been tricky.
It was tricky. It was difficult. There's people who would rather have left things alone completely. At the same time, I think the vocal majority in the room in the community engagements wanted certainty. They wanted to find the truth. They wanted people held accountable, and to that end, we prioritized that voice.
On top of those divisions were questions about the reliability of the technology that led them to dig. Would the GPR survey lead to the discovery of human remains? Or would the excavation come up empty? And what would that mean?
And then I'll give you a point at 15.
Our crew watched as they completed their search in the basement. The next morning, the community gathered for a ceremony to learn what they had found.
So with 70 plus anomalies, we're left to wonder, are any of those burials of our ancestors?
Emotions were close to the surface when Chief Nepemak made the announcement.
And when they did those 14 digs, they did not find any evidence of human remains underneath the church. So of those 14, 0 of those excavations reveal anything looking like human remains.
So how do people here feel? Some said the team must have dug in the wrong spots. The chief worried it could affect other First Nations in their search for the truth. But he says the dig was still the right choice.
I'm absolutely okay to be able to say, we did identify reflections there. Those reflections turned out not to be human remains. So I would ask every single person out there who is receiving information from communities that are doing, science, they're doing the scientific research to identify these reflections and then putting out numbers. Be very cautious. Don't stop there. Take the next steps you need to, but do not let the ground penetrating radar numbers be the conclusive evidence that you need to arrive at your healing pathway.
In this, you can see there are 2 giant rocks in the base. So this is the floor of the reflection. It's completely excavated.
For the team from Brandon, the excavation points to an important discovery. The GPR technology did what it's supposed to. It detected differences in the soil. They found old nails, glass, large rocks.
This dark layer here.
Layers of ash. Perhaps debris from a fire decades ago.
There's some ceramic. There's a pattern on it.
If it's not human remains, what does that mean now?
For the context of this work?
Yes.
I think, first of all, we always have to remember that GPR cannot tell us for sure that it's a grave or that the reflection contains human remains. It's just beyond the technology. The only way to ever understand what's in a reflection is to excavate.
But, she stresses, this search was not a clear example of what to expect as other communities continue to investigate.
This church basement, though, is a really unique situation. It's not something where I think you can draw direct parallels between the work here or even the reflections that have been identified outside of the church. And certainly you can't draw direct parallels to any other work that's going on in these kinds of investigations in Canada.
With the results disclosed, the community was welcomed into the basement to see the work for the first time. Inside, tears from some survivors, but mixed with other sentiments. How do you feel that there's been no human remains found?
I'm happy that there's no human remains found. And we do have quite a few people that come and say, I hope they don't find anything, right? Because then, I don't know, maybe it's a sense of relief. I've been thinking all this already this last couple weeks. I've been thinking about how are we going to get this word out so that it doesn't paint us with a negative a negative picture for people to say, we told you there wouldn't be anything there.
Right.
But we needed to do it so that a lot of our people can begin that process of healing. I feel like, yeah, this is just one phase, so we need to still continue.
Your 7-day forecast is next.
Another sunny and mild September day tomorrow. The winds will be a little bit stronger. Next system is Thursday afternoon and evening, rolling in toward the Interlake, but Winnipeg may just be far enough north to catch some of that in the afternoon and evening, and then it does look like some rain Saturday night and through Sunday. A new high-tech transit cop will soon be on patrol in New York's subway stations.
Now wait, if you're thinking like RoboCop from the 80s movie, think again. Here's your daily lift. Meet K5, a 360-degree camera on wheels, effectively. That button you just saw being pushed, that's for you to call for help. The NYPD is testing out this friendly-looking droid thing to see how it does preventing crime in subway stations. Basically, a surveillance camera that moves around, reminding you that you are being watched. What do you think, John?
Well, I think, offers a little security for people if they're in trouble.
I think
Push a button.
I think a mean guy's going to kick it. I think it looks friendly and somebody's going to beat it up.
That's right.
That's what I think. Thank you for being with us tonight. See you tomorrow.
Great night.